guys? I'm DMAC from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me is Kayla Fonte, and together we are Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing really well. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it's been a wonderful big week in the NBA as per normal, but I guess with the New Year and Christmas gone by as well, it's just been hectic in our personal lives as well. But get up to anything much?
Nothing really. Just looking at my fantasy team, the usual.
Nice. Yes. Yeah. I've done that in between a little bit of celebrations, a few drinks here and there. Nothing outrageous, but yeah, it's good to get back into fantasy hoops. But shall we get into our review?
Let's do it.
Nice one. All right. As per normal, hot performers as well as our sell highs. Starting with Alperen Şengün. In the last week, he's the 14th ranked 9-cat player, which is unbelievable. He's 41st for the season in category leagues. In terms of points, he had a week that he was the 17th ranked player, but he's 21st for the season. So we know that he's just an outstanding player, and up and coming. He's still a young guy as well. So he's mini Jokic, but he's just had an outstanding couple of weeks.
I was just about to say that too. He really reminded me of a mini Jokic. And I think as the season goes on and even in the years to come, he's really going to resemble him a lot more than that. But overall, just great numbers in the primary categories. And he can also give you a lot of steals too, which is very impressive.
Yeah, and look, he's a sell high in terms of the last week because you look at some of those numbers in the last week. 2.5 steals is not sustainable,
Mhm.
but everything else seems quite manageable for him. 85.7% from the free throw line is above normal for him, and that's on high volume as well. But I can't see him being that much worse for the season. Like that's something that I would expect in future years, and it's just coming a little bit earlier. 2.5 steals, that's not going to be every single week. So it is a bit of a sell high, but you know what? I just love rolling with him. So I don't know if I really do want to sell him unless you can get someone that's perhaps a top 20 or a top 30 guy. But 41st for the season in categories, you'd be really happy with that. Second guy, Franz Wagner. In the last week, he's ranked 19th in 9-cat, but he's 58th for the season. So yeah, definitely an uptick. But in points, 20th as well. So definitely a vast improvement on the rest of the season. So he's 50th for the season. And he's doing it on a lot of volume as well. So 27.8 points per game. I think that was across 3 or 4 games in the last week. But 1.5 steals as well. That's a little bit elevated on his season output so far. But everything else is really sustainable. You know that he's a highly efficient player. So 51.9 from the field isn't unsustainable, but also 88.5. He's a very good free throw shooter.
Yeah, as of late, he's really been on a roll, and even in points leagues too. I think he was ranked above Paolo Banchero, which is pretty impressive too. But overall, he posted some really well-rounded stat lines, especially in the primary categories, and that's probably something he'll be able to sustain for the most part too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with Markel Fultz coming back. Does that change the dynamic? Is there less facilitation for him? So 5.0 assists per game in the last week. Does that drop off now that another guard's coming into the lineup? Let's wait and see, but it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. Next is Devin Vassell. He's on a tear at the moment. So 13th ranked 9-cat player in the last week. He's 70th for the season, but this one is a definite sell high. And just for the fact that you know that the Spurs are tanking, they're having a really poor season. So you think down the stretch, they're likely to look at these younger guys and their franchise players, so himself and Wemby, and probably look to really take care of them. I'll say rest in inverted commas, but yeah, they'll look to take care of these guys down the stretch.
Yeah, and his season's been really up and down too, so it's nice to have this really explosive week from him. Overall, he just had a really strong two-way performance too, especially in the main categories, and even with threes and steals, he's also had some of those.
Yeah, you know that steals, in terms of category leagues, steals definitely boost that value and sometimes quite artificially. But yeah, 3.3 steals per game across the week is very impressive. And his shooting splits has been awesome as well. So yeah, definite sell high for him. Next, Andre Drummond. This is an easy one, but I don't think you'll be able to sell high just for the fact that people know that Nikola Vucevic is due back probably within the next week, maybe even in the next few days. So let's say by the end of the week he does return. That'll force Andre Drummond back to the bench, and he'll pretty much be a dud player from there. He won't be rosterable in a 12-teamer, but if you're able to pull off a convincing con job and look, say, I think Vucevic is going to be traded and Drummond's going to be the starting center. And just look how good he is, 21.3 rebounds across the last week. Unbelievable. He's winning you rebounds by himself, which is pretty rare in this day and age.
I know it's insane, but I think the best thing to do with him is just take advantage while you can. And now that we know what he's capable of when Vucevic is out, he's going to be one of the top streaming options again. But I think Vuce was also out for 7 to 10 days. So he should be returning sometime late this week, maybe early next week, depending on the injury.
Yeah. And you look at those stocks as well. You look at 2 steals. He's always been a good steals guy. Not a great defender, but he gets in the passing lane. He does get those steals. But 1.7 blocks is up on what he normally gives us, even back in the glory days at the Pistons as well. But much better in terms of points leagues, just because you know that free throws are the big killer. So you look at that 37.5% from the free throw line on pretty high volume, 5.3 attempts per game, and it kills you. It definitely kills you. So you're punting that in categories. In terms of points, you're just going to really enjoy this. So hopefully in the next few games, you have an opportunity to sell. If not, just write it out and really enjoy it for this coming week. Next is Brandon Ingram. What a week he's had. 6th ranked player in category leagues, 68th for the season. So definite sell high, but he's done that on some really unsustainable defensive numbers. So 2.3 steals per game, 2.7 blocks per game. Unfathomable from this guy, who we know that he's a great scorer, pretty good in terms of his shooting efficiency, but it's the defensive stats is pretty unheard of at this stage.
Yeah, overall, he's had really amazing efforts in every category, or most categories, and really dominant stat lines. I could see him going back to, like, cooling down a bit next week. We all know how the Pelicans can get. It seems like they all kind of take turns having really hot weeks, and then they kind of come back down to earth. So I think we can expect that from him pretty soon.
Yeah, I think so. I really love that photo of him as well. He's had a big day. Jared Allen, now he's been on a massive tear as well. So we know that Evan Mobley has been out for some time. He will continue to be out probably for the next 7 or 8 weeks. So I said this as soon as Evan Mobley went down. I think Jared Allen was going to thrive, and he has done so. So he's been quite sensational. So it's not just the rebounds that you expect from him. That's elevated on his normal level, but it's the output in terms of his scoring. His percentages, free throw percentage particularly stands out. So you know what you're going to get in terms of high field goals, good rebounds, decent blocks. You look at 0.7 blocks, that could probably come up a little bit as well. So there's room to improve, but I just think that scoring output is quite elevated. So another sell high candidate.
He's really taken a leap offensively over the past few games, and he's posted some insane double-doubles too with rebounds. He also had some solid numbers with assists, and he can even give you those defensive numbers too.
Yeah, he's really taken that Evan Mobley role on board. So 5.3 assists, that's quite unlike Jared Allen. But yeah, we definitely take it, and he's quite skillful as a big man. Now, in contrast, disappointments, but also buy low opportunities. Not too dissimilar to when we last spoke, which was a few days ago, but Mikal Bridges, slight improvement over the last couple of games, but he's still just been horrible in the last week, but even quite disappointing in terms of the season, where, as we spoke about last episode, he was being taken in the middle of the second round. And I preached that was far too high for my liking, and it's turned out to be correct.
Oh, definitely. And he just hasn't had the impact that we've expected him to have this season, which is a little bit surprising too, given that Ben Simmons is out and they've dealt with several injuries over the past few weeks. But yeah, overall, just very underwhelming, and he's had a lot of issues with efficiency as well.
Yeah, unlike him. Yeah, we talked about the glory days of his high efficiency game. But you look at the steals, quite low. The field goal percentage low, when we were just used to him shooting at 50% when he was at the Suns. Obviously a higher volume here at the Nets, but this is just next level. Very, very disappointing. In the last week, of course, that included that forced dud where he did sit out the second half against the Bucks as well. So I know he wasn't happy with that. I wouldn't be surprised with the Nets. They're just middling. They're not doing great. I think they're just going to look after their guys as well. They know it's not going to be a great campaign for them. So they're really going to look after someone that they think is a cornerstone of their franchise. But yeah, very disappointing. I still think it's a buy low opportunity. Next, Steph. We spoke about him last episode as well. And again, slightly improved in the last couple, but definitely still a buy low opportunity.
Yeah, and I think we kind of expected this going into the season too, especially with that offseason acquisition of Chris Paul. In the whole situation with the Warriors is just a little messy right now with the suspension injuries. We have other players like the rookies, which we'll talk about later, who are stepping up. Um, yeah, I think this is something that's going to remain for pretty much the rest of the season too. He might start to heat up closer to the end as we get near the playoffs, but I think this is about what we can expect from him.
Right. Yeah. Look, I think he is due to improve, and I'll say that just because I think he plays better next to Draymond, and I think Draymond's a bit of his bodyguard, but he'll provide those moving screens, illegal moving screens. But that does help Steph and his ability to get free and shoot. Look, he's still getting 4 threes a game, but you look at that field goal percentage at 30%. That's just unlike Steph, and I still think a great buy low opportunity. But you could be right. You could be right. Paul George, in a similar vein, he's done pretty well this season, but in the last week, he's been very disappointing. But that's come on pretty bad shooting from the field, but as well, just his steal rate hasn't been there, particularly since the Harden trade.
Yeah, you know what? I was looking at his stats this week. Like in points leagues, he was still pretty decent. He just didn't give us the fantasy points that we're used to seeing from him. And that's mostly also due to some rough shooting splits and even some turnovers too. I think this is likely to change sometime soon.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the Clippers are looking really impressive. So, yeah, he's a key part of that. Bam Adebayo. Now, this is definitely one for category leagues because you look at that ranking for points, he's practically the same. So in the last week, 19th in points leagues, but 19th on the season. But then you look at the categories, 101st. So you go, why is that? But look at his shooting splits, 46.5% from the field, where he's typically well over 50%, but also free throw. He's very dependable, typically very dependable from the stripe, but shooting at 70% on a very high volume, that definitely kills you in terms of categories. So you're punting that at this stage. But yeah, unlike him, I think he can turn it around. You look at the rebounds, that's actually elevated. But I think the other areas are where he can improve.
Yeah, in points leagues, he hasn't really changed too much. I actually have him on one of my teams, and I was still pretty happy with him this week, but he still didn't give you a lot of those defensive numbers that we're used to seeing. And that's where a lot of the value comes from in points leagues too.
Yeah, absolutely. Another big man, Cat. The last week, 270th ranked player, 40th for the season. So he's come back a little bit because he was a second rounder for a while there, and he's come back. But in the last week, only scoring 16 points per game. Extremely disappointing. Only 1.5 threes, which when he's saying he's the best shooting big man of all time, it's probably not indicative. 1.5 threes per game is not indicative of that. 7.3 rebounds also is a decrease on what we typically see from him. But look at those defensive stats: 0 steals and 0 blocks per game. Very disappointing. He's never going to give you a high level of steals or blocks, particularly next to Rudy Gobert, who we'll speak about next. But 0 steals and 0 blocks is just very underwhelming. And again, field goals, 44.7%, where he's typically around that 51% mark.
Yeah, overall, he was just really disappointing in practically every category, too, especially having those really low scoring performances that didn't help. And I'm pretty sure he got under less than 10 rebounds in every single game that he played last week, too, which is even worse.
Yeah, look, in the last game, which was last night, he did look more impressive. Good point scoring game. But again, just those defensive stats aren't coming at the moment. But I think he can turn that around. Now, the Twin Towers, his partner in crime, Rudy Gobert, ranked 113th in 9-cat, 65th for the season. Just look at his numbers there. His free throws actually been pretty good this week, but it's really the blocks. And typically you'll see him at over 2 blocks a game, so 2.1 on the season, but 1 block per game definitely decreases his value in both category leagues and points leagues.
Yeah, he's contributed very few defensive stats that we really need from him. And not the best double doubles either. They're pretty low. I mean, he's getting them, but it's just not as high as we need them to be. And his numbers have just fluctuated throughout the week, too.
Yeah, you'd expect high rebounds from him, but that'll come back. Like, he's a big man. They don't get any shorter. So I would expect him to really bounce back. Maybe that free throw number does come back a little bit, but I expect those blocks to come back up as well. All right. Quickly looking at some ads, and pun intended, Emmanuel, quickly. So since the trade, I think he is a must roster player. And the first game, fairly quiet. not the hugest of games, I still think he is a must-add player. What do you think?
I think so too. I have a feeling that the Raptors are going to continue to start them. So as long as he's in that position, he has that potential to grow and just give you those good numbers.
I was somewhat surprised that he did start over Dennis Schroeder. I know the previous games, Schroeder came off the bench, Gary Trent Jr. started, but in this game, Trent Jr. and Schroeder came off the bench. Emmanuel quickly started, which was very impressive for the first game. Somewhat, I was expecting him to sit this one, but it was great that he was able to clear, I guess, customs, get into your country as well, and do fairly well. But I think his rostership will increase as well, and he's just going to flourish, in my opinion.
I think so too.
Another person that was indirectly impacted by, well, I'll say directly impacted by the trade, but Dante DiVincenzo. So with Emmanuel quickly going to the Raptors, that's opened up a little bit more playing time for DiVincenzo at the Knicks. First game where the trade pretty much happened a few hours before the game, he just went absolutely nuclear, and he was Steph-like as well. The game last night, not as much and quite limited in terms of his playing time. So 26 minutes, he still started, and I think he needs to be rostered.
I think so too. And it's the same kind of situation with Josh Hart. We can't expect that blow up performance that they had the day of the trade, but I think they'll see a little bit more usage that they were seeing before. And as a result of that, they should give you a little bit better numbers, or they could even be better streamers when injuries occur.
Yeah, and I guess this one was a little bit unusual as well. So only playing 26 minutes from DiVincenzo, but perhaps some of that was attributed to just Julius Randle just getting absolutely going crazy. 39 points, just a lot of shots, a lot of usage. So let's see. Let's hold him. He's got another game on Wednesday, I believe, against the Bulls. Let's see how that plays out. I still think he's rosterable for now. Yeah, like I said, we'll see how that turns out for both him and Josh Hart. Andre Drummond, we already spoke about him. He needs to be added, if not already. Most leagues probably would have added him, but if for whatever reason he is not rostered, please make sure he is, at least for the next week or so. Young man Trace Jackson Davis from the Golden State Warriors, he's starting, which is quite unbelievable. It's great for him, but I guess Draymond Green's due back soon from suspension as well. So we'll see how that plays out, but for now, he needs to be rostered. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think Draymond is still about a week away, maybe 2 from returning. The whole situation's a little bit unclear because he has to fulfill all these things before he can actually return. But in the meantime, pick up the rookie. I streamed him last week and he did not disappoint.
Yeah, and Steve Kerr came out and said, look, we'll run with this starting 5 for the time being. I guess that's until Draymond does return, changes up the rotation somewhat. But yeah, for now, run with TJD. In a similar vein, Jonathan Kuminga is starting as well. Like I said, Steve Kerr said he's going to run with these guys. So he's got to be rostered. He's not going to give you that ultimate efficiency. He's not great from the free throw line, but he's not going to kill you either. So I think he needs to be rostered. Mm-hmm. Next one, Grayson Allen. Yes, Bradley Beal has returned, but Grayson Allen's still starting. There's going to be days where Bradley Beal does sit. At the moment, Kevin Durant is also injured. I think Durant may miss the next game. He's got some hamstring soreness. So that opens up a little bit more usage, more shots for Grayson Allen. So I think he must also be rostered. Eric Gordon to a lesser extent, but Grayson Allen's still my preferred guy of the two.
Yeah, it's funny too, because originally Eric Gordon was the preferred player, but I think it's almost like they switched.
Yeah.
But yeah, Allen is definitely the stream, especially with the Phoenix Suns always dealing with injuries.
Yeah, look, I wanted to add Eric Gordon there, but it's hard to recommend someone who had a bit of a stinker in the last one. But yeah, either one of those guys, if not both, I think they're definitely rosterable. Next is Isaiah Hartenstein. I pretty much had an Isaiah Hartenstein hour the other day where I just banged on about this guy. Just amazing. Tibbs loves him. He's giving you stocks. He's not giving you many points, but that's not why you picked him up. Really impressive big man, and Precious Achiuwa is not taking those minutes away from him.
Yeah, and he has great long-term value too. So I'm surprised that he's only rostered 62%. So that definitely has to go up a little bit more.
I think so. And he's not necessarily killing you at the free throw line. He's not fantastic. He's not going to win you that category for category leagues, but he's not killing you as well. So those defensive stats are invaluable. So yeah, make sure he is rostered. Nick Richards, again, Mark Williams is doubtful. He's perennially doubtful. How many games has he missed? It's just, very, very frustrating in terms of those that do have Mark Williams on their team. But then you've got Nick Richards, so he must be rostered at this stage whilst Mark Williams is sidelined.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I just happened to pick him up that one game where I think he only got me like 10 fantasy points. But for the most part, though, he is pretty consistent. And as long as he's seeing those increased minutes, he's worth an ad.
Yeah, and even in that disappointing game, the output was terrible, but the minutes were fantastic. I think it was
Mhm.
31 minutes in that game. So, yeah, um, he must be rostered at this stage. Karis LeVert, it's taken him a while to warm up, but overnight he had a bit of a monster game. That's alongside of Donovan Mitchell. And we spoke about LeVert being a pickup. It was looking a bit shaky, but he was, it just made more sense. He had to be picked up. Darius Garland will be missing for a little bit longer as well. So I think he has to be rostered.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people have complained about his efficiency and his consistency too, but he's still one of the more reliable streams compared to some of the other Cavaliers too.
Yeah, I think so. He's not the ultimate efficiency guy, and even back from his Nets days, that's never been his strength. But in terms of volume, I think he has to be had. Alex Caruso, this is definitely one for category leagues, particularly with those steals. But for now, he has to be rostered. But there's been word and there's a bit of an update in terms of Zach LaVine's availability. He was training with the G League team. It's looking like he will return by the end of the week, which perhaps that diminishes Alex Caruso's value. Kobe White as well, one of our favorites. Maybe even Patrick Williams as well. But for now, I think Alex Caruso needs to be rostered. What do you think?
I think it really depends for points leagues, just because he's a guy who would probably give you about 20 fantasy points per game, depending on your settings, of course. In deeper leagues, I think he is worth an ad, but like you said before, it's just be mindful that Zach LaVine will be coming soon, and I have a feeling that Caruso will be the player who's most affected by this.
All right, yeah, let's wait and see on that one. Jaden Ivey, he's been quite impressive. He's getting the minutes. It's looking like he's getting the trust of the organisation finally. He was a high draft pick. What was he, number 6 in the draft? Something like that. I think he has to be rostered at this stage. They're trusting him, looking quite good next to Cade as well.
Yeah, as long as he's receiving those minutes, he has to be added. But we mention this every week. Just keep monitoring the lineup because we all know that it changes week to week.
Yeah, Killian Hayes isn't getting the run, and he
Mhm.
was taking his spot earlier in the season. But yeah, it looks like Jaden Ivey at this stage is going to run with it, and that's great for even for his dynasty value moving forward. Tari Eason, another young gun. Look, he does have a minutes restriction, and they've come out. Houston have said, Ime Udoka has said that he'll probably play in the mid to the late 20s in terms of minutes playing time, which isn't great for his ultimate value. But in that playing time, he's been tremendous. Yes, there's been a couple of injuries. Dylan Brooks, another great Canadian, he's been out injured. Jabari Smith has come back in the last game, but he was also injured before that. But Tari Eason, I think for now, needs to be rostered. You just know that he's a bit of a beast when it comes to just limited playing time, but fantasy output.
Yeah, and I think his restriction was 25 to 27 minutes, if I remember correctly. But even then, he's shown that he could still make an impact and be rosterable in fantasy. So I think capitalize on it while you can. But I also think that he did carve a role for himself in the rotation, even when the Rockets are back at full strength.
Yeah, and it's looking like even with the injuries, he was coming off the bench anyway, but he's doing really well off the bench. Now, Larry Nance, this is a little bit of a far-fetched one, but this is going back to his glory days. In the last two games or so, he's been really impressive. He's looking like he could have a bit of a minute split with Jonas Valanciunas, which it looked like it was the case last season, and Valanciunas had a very disappointing season last season. He came back with a vengeance this season, but that was in Larry Nance's absence. Larry Nance is now back, getting double doubles, looking really active on the defensive end. He's a steals specialist. He'll get you really good field goal percentage as well. So I think he's a nice ad, at least for the stream. I think they have a back to back in the next couple of days. I'm pretty sure that they do. So great ad, at least for the next 2 days.
Yeah, and he's shown flashes of potential on both ends of the floor too. And if he is splitting that time with Valanciunas, he is worth an ad if he's going to see those increased minutes. The only thing is just that consistency. Um, but he's still worth trying out, and if not, drop.
Yeah, and we know that the Pelicans like to run Nance next to Zion as well. So as long as Zion's healthy, I think that's a good thing for
Mhm.
Nance's value, which Zion has been healthy this season. And finally, Aaron Neesmith, bit of a quieter shooting game in terms of his point scoring overnight, but he gave the defensive stats. And this is something that I haven't really attributed to Aaron Neesmith. I think he's a sneaky great, or not great, sneaky good defender. It just hasn't translated into fantasy output, but now it is. And you know that he can turn it on at any certain stage.
Yeah, his numbers have been a little bit up and down as of late, but I actually have him as one of my ads too. And the promising thing is that I think a few games ago, he got into the starting lineup, which is only good for him.
Yeah, bad for people like Obi Toppin as well.
Mhm.
Now, in contrast, the drops. Precious Achua, I opened with him just because I was banging on about Isaiah Hartenstein. So, of course, I'm going to talk about Precious Achua. He was greatly added yesterday, which I thought was unbelievable. He's one of the top 10 guys that were added for the game, for the day, which was quite unfathomable. And I think people just got excited. They just assumed that Tibbs would like his output, but I don't think he gives them enough. So we're going to roll with Hartenstein for the time being and Precious Achua only for deeper leagues.
Yeah, I agree with the same thing. Even on the Raptors, I don't think he was ever really worth adding or even streaming. And I think it's going to be the exact same case with the Knicks.
Yep, agreed. Herb Jones, we spoke about him last episode. A slightly better game in the last game, but I just don't think he's worthy of a roster spot in standard leagues.
Yeah, exact same thing with points. I think he's more of a streaming option.
Yep. Naz Reid again for deeper leagues. He did have a bit of a hot run. We spoke about him again in the last episode, but he's gone really, really cold at the moment. And yes, Cat's there, Gobert's there. Maybe when one, if not both, are injured, he's definitely going to be a must-add player. But in the meantime, coming off the bench, I don't think he needs to be rostered in standard leagues.
Yeah, he has those stretches where he's very hot or very cold. And right now he's cold, so he's not really going to add anything to your team.
Yep, I think he's more suited to 14 or 16 team leagues at this stage. But yeah, watch for him. Like you said, watch for him to get really hot. And it's probably time for at least a stream. Kevin Huerter, I think he's on my list every single week. I don't hate the guy. He's just not giving you great fantasy output, and he's just far too highly rostered, 40% for someone that's not deserving of that.
I think people just have a lot of hopes for him. He does have that tendency to explode, but it's more so when he's receiving those increased minutes. And that's when he should be rostered.
Yep, and we've seen it when De'Aaron Fox has missed or one of the other starters have missed. He sort of stepped up, but not in a way that you just have to wait for those big games on occasion and just hope that someone else gets injured, because it just doesn't work out that way. In a similar vein, Harrison Barnes, same deal. Like they're starting, but they're just not giving you the fantasy output. Moving on to Kyle Lowry. Jimmy Butler has been out, but Kyle Lowry is still not doing anything with the minutes. He was also out as well. He's just old, inconsistent, and very unreliable.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say.
Nothing else needed. Craig Porter Jr., great pickup whilst Donovan Mitchell was sidelined, but since he's returned, I think Craig Porter's definitely one for deeper leagues, definitely not for standard 12-team category or points leagues. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would say so too. I did have him in my ads last week, but like you said, that was while Mitchell was out. I think that if he is inserted into the starting lineup again, I think he is worth a stream. He shows a lot of promise, and he's been pretty good in points leagues.
Yeah, he's a solid player, just not getting the opportunity at this stage right now. Asar Thompson, again, we've talked about him the last few weeks. It's just very disappointing, particularly from where he was pretty much a star at the start of the season, a fantasy stud, let's put it. But he's just not, again, this opportunity. We know he's got that skill set, fantasy skill set that's just perfect. But if he's not getting that playing time, it's quite useless.
Yeah, exactly. I dropped him last week and no looking back from that.
For now. But let's see what happens. Yeah. Keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on his brother as well. I think his brother has less of a chance to actually break into the starting lineup and do anything with the season, just because there's more depth at Houston. But Asar Thompson, just keep an eye on him. But yeah, not rosterable at the moment. Peyton Watson, great pickup while Aaron Gordon was sidelined with a dog bite injury, but Gordon returned yesterday, so Peyton Watson can be dropped from standard leagues.
Yeah, there's not many streamable players on the Nuggets overall too, unless one of those starters are out.
Yep, agreed. Gary Trent, we spoke about him. He did start for a while, but then the trade happened. dynamics have changed. He's now coming off the bench, and he's just not worthy of a 12-teamer.
I feel like a lot of people got excited too, as we mentioned before. But I'm seeing his roster percentage was 38, and I think before it was like 30. So a lot of people rushed to grab him, thinking that he would take on a greater role, and it's probably going to stay about the same as it was before.
Yeah, he had a back-to-back late in the week last week. I actually rostered him for that back-to-back and hit the second game of that back-to-back was awesome. But that was the day of the trade, I believe. So, yeah, he had great opportunity. As soon as that trade happened, you knew that these guys were going to be cleared. He was a drop. But, yeah, it's proven to be correct. Jaden McDaniels, great defender in real life. Doesn't translate to fantasy value, and people have high hopes for him. It's just not going to happen this season.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing too. I think he's someone who you could monitor, but you could probably safely drop without worrying that someone's gonna rush and pick him up.
Yep, agreed. Buddy Hill, controversial, but for what he provides, I don't think he is a must drop, but I also don't think he's a must roster player.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes tied to like Andrew Wiggins. It's more the name that people see, and that's why they feel the need to roster him. But I think in majority of leagues, he probably can be safely dropped, especially if there's someone on the waivers who is performing better.
Yeah, and Benedict Mathurin went off nicely yesterday, which definitely limited Hill's playing time and his ability to take those shots as well. So it's going to be a little bit hot and cold, but I don't think you necessarily have to roster this guy. But again, it depends on who the pickup is, on a few different factors, perhaps even team build. Maybe he suits your build perfectly. But again, it depends on your team. Paul Reed, good streamer whilst Joel Embiid was out, but he's now returning tomorrow, which is good news, or today at your time. Good news. So Paul Reed can be dropped from standard leagues. Don't need to think any more about that. PJ Washington, he was okay. He was fine. And Mark Williams being out probably helped him a little bit, but he's just not making the most of it. He's not getting the playing time, which I would have expected as well with Mark Williams sidelined.
Yeah, he's been decent, and we kind of saw this in the past when Miles Bridges returned. He could still give you a couple of good games here and there, but the same could be said for the opposite. He also struggles a little bit in some games, and you just got to know what you're going to expect with this guy. It's very inconsistent.
Yeah, and I think Miles Bridges being there does definitely impact PJ Washington's output. Nick Richards has had solid minutes, as we alluded to earlier as well. So that's definitely impacted PJ Washington's output. And finally, I'll get you to talk through this one, somewhat controversial.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's probably a pretty controversial pick, but he was passed around in a lot of my points leagues. I just think that he's a very one-dimensional player, and especially in categories too. I feel like he would be even worse because at least in points, like threes, are worth a little bit more too. But he's outside of threes and points, he's not really giving you that much. There's the occasional game where he'll get you a couple of rebounds and assists, but I don't think it's really enough to warrant a roster spot. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. As controversial as it is, I don't think he's a must roster player. He is one-dimensional, as you've said. I've had this argument on Twitter with a few people where they think, well, they thought he was going to maintain his top 30, top 40 value moving forward. It was just unsustainable. And a few guys coming back, Cam Johnson coming back, obviously not the greatest high usage player, but it does impact the dynamic as well. And Cam Thomas, one-dimensional, he's not going to give you those defensive stats that you really need in terms of that across the board contribution as well. So yeah, look, as controversial it is, it could be a potential drop. At this stage, if it was me, I would still hold just for that name value and for him to pop off and then look to sell if possible. But I think people see through that sort of stuff these days. So if there's another hot free agent that's more suited, particularly for category leagues, I wouldn't hesitate in dropping him. Notable injuries. Actually, this is not too bad. In terms of its length. But Markel Fultz is questionable for today's game, which is great news. Haven't seen him in quite some time, so it would be awesome to see him. We alluded to it before when we spoke about Franz Wagner, but another one to keep an eye on is Jalen Suggs and just how that plays out. Jalen Suggs has had a really good season so far, but with Markel Fultz being added to that dynamic, let's see how that plays out. You've got Cole Anthony still there. Anthony Black has been starting as well. So just that guard depth is going to be quite interesting. And then you've got facilitators at the forward position with Banchero and Franz Wagner as well. So it'll be very interesting to see. And hopefully it doesn't change the dynamic with the winning culture that they've built up this season. Kevin Durant, hamstring soreness. We spoke about it earlier. I think he'll miss the next game just to be cautious as well. He's quite an old guy now, so I would expect him to miss, but not too much more after that. Maybe one game, maybe two, but hamstring. Just trying to be cautious with this guy. Mark Williams, he's been tagged as doubtful for probably the last 3-4 weeks, if that, which has been great for Nick Richards' value. Terrible news for us that do have Mark Williams on the team, but there was a bit of an update overnight as well. So he's progressing, but it's progressing slower than what we'd like as well. So I'd expect him to be out probably for another week, if not longer. But it's hard to know with the Hornets and the reporting of injuries as well. Good segue into the next one. LaMelo Ball, ankle. I'm hoping it'll be less than a week, but again, not a great deal of reporting on this injury. But he's had ankle issues in the past, but I'm hoping just based on the initial timeline that it'll be around the 1 week mark, maybe less, but who knows with this organization.
I don't think he was cleared for contact either. Sorry, just to note that. So that's not the best news, but yeah, hopefully within maybe a week, maybe two.
Yeah,
really depends.
Yeah, it's not going to be a winning season for them. So, look, he is going to be the future of the franchise as well if they can retain his services. So they've got to look after their asset as well. So I probably wouldn't be rushing him back if I was leading that organization. But who knows with this team? Gordon Hayward on the same team as well. He's old. We knew he was just an injury waiting to happen. Calf strain, probably add on a week or two just because he is so old and so injury prone as well. I don't think they're going to rush to get him back. But again, I'm expecting 1 to 2 weeks with this injury. DeAndre Ayton, Portland again, going to be a tanking season, a losing season. So knee tendonitis, I think around a week out again, which opens up some more time. We've seen Jabari Walker be quite impressive as well, and just a few other guys stand out from the crowd. I think you're going to get a lot of this down the stretch with DeAndre Ayton, even guys like Anthony Simons as well. I think they're going to look after these guys. They're still relatively young, Simons and Ayton. So I think they'll look after them down the stretch. But yeah, this current injury, I think it probably another week or so for DeAndre Ayton. Your man from Canada, Dylan Brooks, probably about a week with an oblique strain. So he'll come back into that Houston starting lineup, which will be interesting to see because, they've got a lot of depth now. And Amen Thompson looked pretty good. It was just junk time in the end of the game against his brother's team as well just yesterday. He was looking okay. He was looking really good, but that'll change again once Dylan Brooks returns to that lineup. We spoke about Zach LaVine, foot soreness. It's looking like he'll return within the next week, which is great news for those that held on to Zach LaVine, that remained patient, didn't sell low, which we always advise against. It will hurt the likes of Kobe White. It will hurt the likes of Alex Caruso, and I think it will hurt the likes of Patrick Williams. But let's just wait and see because who knows what will happen. Trade deadline. We saw a trade last week. There could be some more. I think they're going to blow it up. I can't see the big three of Chicago remaining together. So it could be LaVine, it could be DeMar DeRozan, it could be Vucevic, it could be all three. Let's wait and see. So I wouldn't be dropping Kobe White. Absolutely do not drop Kobe White. I wouldn't be dropping Alex Caruso. He's one of my ads. And Patrick Williams, I think he's rosterable as well. In a similar vein, Nikola Vucevic, he's about a week with that adductor strain. Again, that's going to impact Andre Drummond, which you just enjoy the ride. As we said, yes, sell high, but people see through that. They know that Vucevic is going to return very soon. People are onto it. They're switched on, particularly if they follow us on Twitter. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Ben Simmons, who knows with this guy? We've spoken about this. This timeline it feels like it keeps extending. I think I said last week it was 1 to 2 weeks. I've probably made it 2 to 3 weeks. We just don't really know. We're not getting too much word out of his camp either. So I'm going to say 2 to 3 weeks, but it could be longer. We just don't really know. So I'll leave it at that. DeAndre Hunter, 1 to 2 weeks. So at the moment, Saddiq Bey is a rosterable guy. Obviously, Jalen Johnson is going great guns. He's actually picked up his play. He looks amazing. So he has to be rostered. Saddiq Bey, like I said, must roster whilst DeAndre Hunter is still sidelined. But I don't think Hunter needs to be held unless, of course, you have an open IR slot. What do you think?
I think so too. He was actually one of my drops for this week, to be honest with you. I just don't think he's going to have a significant impact, especially even though he's in that starting unit, just because JJ's back. You have that talented backcourt. There's not much of a huge role for him to have.
Yeah. Okay. Darius Garland, 2 to 3 weeks away with that jaw. But like we said, Karis LeVert is the guy to have in the meantime. Zach Collins, 3 to 4 weeks, which is disappointing for the organization. He was going to play a pretty good role down the stretch, particularly with thoughts that Wemby would sit out quite a few more games. He would sit out the back-to-back in the foreseeable future, or at least one game in back-to-backs in the foreseeable future. But it opens up some opportunities for the Spurs and their depth as well. But we'll speak about that later on. Evan Mobley, knee soreness, probably 7 to 8 weeks. It's very disappointing for Cleveland, but they're hanging on. They're looking okay without him, as we said. A few guys like Jarrett Allen have stepped up. Donovan Mitchell's looked awesome as well, and Karis LeVert. Mitchell Robinson, we spoke about this last time, but he's out for the season, which is great for my man Hartenstein. And Draymond Green, I've got indefinite, less than a week, but that's being very ambitious, optimistic. You're thinking probably maybe 2 weeks, perhaps, but we just don't really know at this stage. All right.
Yeah,
Take
so
us
we
away with your week-long schedule.
Yeah, we already mentioned it in our last episode, but we'll do a quick refresher. So the good news is that every team will be playing at least 3 games, with the majority being 4, and that's 20 teams this week. We have a couple back-to-backs of note. So for the Celtics, Friday, Saturday, we mentioned this before, but keep an eye on Porzingis and Horford. We all know that Horford sits out one of those games in back-to-backs. We also have the Hornets, so that's Monday, Tuesday. And Mark Williams, of course, still receiving those doubtful tags. I wish we had an update, so hopefully that's something that we receive soon and a timeline. And then we also have the Bucks, which is Wednesday and Thursday coming up soon.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for Giannis, Chris Middleton, and we'll see what happens with the Bucks. But perhaps maybe even Dame, but to be determined.
Mm-hmm.
Now, slightly different. I called out for some mailbag questions, so I'll just ask you and get your thoughts on this, Kayla. But we got one from VP. He's very active on Twitter and he's been around the fantasy space for quite some time. But he's asked, what can you get back for Bradley Bum? So I know that he's got a real thing against Bradley Beal. I'm assuming he's on quite a few of his teams. But Bradley Beal, he wants to try to sell high on that bum now that he's back and waiting for one good game. He's been okay. He's played 3 games since his return. But what would you aim for? Do you have any names in mind or some sort of value, particularly from a points perspective in terms of yourself, Kayla?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't have any names in mind. I think that it's going to be very, very difficult to try and trade Bradley Bum. And it's just because of those injury issues, we're not seeing the impact that we're used to seeing from years ago, of course. But yeah, I think he's someone who's going to be very difficult to sell. Definitely outside a top 100 player, 100%. You're probably looking in the range of 150 to 200. And that's if you can find someone to pawn him off to. It's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, I think as VP alluded to, you wait for that one good game. And look, in 3 games he's had, he's looked solid in probably 2 of those 3. And that's probably enough. And just with name value, you could probably get a top 100 guy, maybe a top 80 guy, just based on name value. So just throw out some trade offers, see what happens, buy low on some guys. An offer that I received for Kobe White was Bradley Beal. I actually rejected it, but that was whilst Bradley Beal was still injured. Not sure what I'd do. Actually, I'll pose that question. Kobe White with Zach LaVine returning or Bradley Beal?
To be honest with you, I would still rather have Kobe White just because we kind of mentioned this before, but we don't really know what's going to happen at the trade deadline with the Bulls. It's very likely that they'll blow it all up, which means that players like Kobe White will receive more usage. Whereas with Bradley Beal, he also had Kevin Durant out for some of those games, which is why he posted better stats than normal. I'm also just concerned about how he'll play when they're at full strength.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that as well. Next question. What do you think about Simone Fontecchio or Jabari Walker? So Fontecchio of Utah and Jabari Walker of Portland. Thoughts, Kayla?
I like Fontecchio. The only thing, though, is I feel like he's very inconsistent, but he's a stream that I would consider when I know that the Jazz are dealing with a lot of injuries. As for Walker, I think he's decent. he's a solid ad while they're dealing with a lot of injuries. He's not someone that I would regularly have rostered. Yeah. What do you think?
I think Walker's a good stash. I think he's going to play a pretty big role down the stretch.
Mhm.
And I mentioned earlier with DeAndre Ayton sitting out, I think quite a few games down the stretch just to look after him, look after his health. I think Jabari Walker is going to be quite prominent down the stretch. And similar for Simone Fontecchio, I think guys like John Collins, perhaps even Larry Markkinen, these guys, Walker Kessler, they've got a lot of depth in the front court. But I think he will play a prominent role down the stretch. Just they're both losing teams, nothing really to play for except for draft picks. So they want to continue losing and playing some of these other guys as well. It's a two-part question. Any updates on Draymond? Again, it's indefinite. I
Mhm.
thought perhaps within the week. We're thinking maybe at least 1 to 2 weeks. But yeah, again, no real updates on that. Any further comment?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to really comment on this just because there's certain obligations that he has to fulfill before that he can return, and we kind of have to wait on what Adam Silver says to see if he has fulfilled all those.
Yeah. Okay. Watch this space. Next question. This is a trade question. Should I trade Cade and DeAndre Ayton for Austin Reeves and Damian Lillard in head-to-head points league? So points
Hmm.
extraordinaire. Take it away.
All right. Well, the only thing about Lillard, he's not producing as well as me and a lot of other people have hoped that he would. The only thing, though, the benefit is that he's on a competitive team, which means that he's going to consistently receive those high minutes, and he probably could heat up towards the end of the season. With Cade, they're already out of playoff contention. There's no doubt about that. Um, so the thing was, the Pistons could start experimenting with different lineups, giving more minutes to the younger guys, and being cautious with Cade. As we know, he has a lofty injury history, so they don't want to jeopardize that for next season. Even with DeAndre Ayton too, he's been pretty solid. A couple of injury issues here and there. But honestly, I would actually do that trade. I would take Dame and Austin Reeves. I feel like they have more to offer.
I think so. I am in complete agreement with you. I think Lillard, like you said, he's just got that pedigree and those games that Giannis will miss as well. He's just going to go absolutely nuclear.
Mhm.
And I think Austin Reeves has room to improve. Like he's been relatively subdued and quite disappointing, but there was a lot of hype
Yeah.
around him coming into the season, coming out of Team USA at the World Championships, at the World Cup. A lot of hype around him. And he's been very disappointing. But again, are they going to be playing less of LeBron and less of AD? They're going to probably look at experimenting, like you said, a little bit with the Lakers lineup as well. So I would definitely take the latter side of that trade. I'm with you. Next question. Is Jalen Suggs still a hold in 12 teamers?
I would say so. For now, at least. I think it's also a monitor situation. The only thing is, and we mentioned this before, is just that backlog that the Magic has in their backcourt. It really depends on the minutes that he's receiving. And I think the best thing to do is monitor. If there's a better option on the waiver wire, I would consider dropping him. But I also don't think that this is a player that people would rush to go and grab.
Mm. Yeah, I think he's a hold, a definite hold at this stage. And I think with Markel Fultz returning, they're going to play alongside of each other. I would expect them to start alongside of each other. And then Markel Fultz is going to miss games as well. He's going to sit out back to backs. He's going to be limited in his minutes. So I think there's still a solid role for Suggs moving forward. This one from Phil. Do you prefer Isaiah Hartenstein to Goga Badadze in category leagues? Goga starting has me interested, but Hartenstein definitely stuffs the stat sheet. Look, it's an interesting one. At Orlando, you've got Goga Badadze, you've got Wendell Carter Jr., and we spoke about him last week being a drop. I still maintain that thought process. I think Goga, it is interesting that he is starting, but they've also got Mo Wagner as well. Mo Wagner's playing a little bit more at power forward. So you've got those three bigs, but Jonathan Isaac has missed a couple of games as well. So maybe that's contributed to that. For me, yeah, it's Hartenstein, hands down Hartenstein. He's got that he's got the minutes. He's got the trust of Thibs moving forward as well. He just looks awesome. It looks really good on the defensive end. The rebounds are invaluable. Definitely Hartenstein for me.
And I would say the exact same thing, even for points leagues. He's just way more valuable. He has that long-term value. With the Magic centers, I think you don't really have to add any of them. And we talked about this last week too. they're kind of all drops. But Goga has that potential when he's given those minutes and a starting role, but he doesn't compare to Isaiah.
Yeah, I think in limited minutes, he is probably the better guy. If they were to have limited minutes but the same amount, I would pick Gogo just because he has that ability to just go off with blocks in a limited amount of time. Whereas Wendell Carter Jr. sort of is an accumulator, better on the offensive end, but not as good on the defensive end, in my opinion. So someone chasing a win in fantasy on the last day, I'm assuming this was at the end of last week, they dropped Ivica Zubac and RJ Barrett. The question is, who should I prioritize as the pickup out of Zubac and Barrett?
I would say Barrett. I have a feeling that he's going to play really well with the Raptors. I think he has a lot of potential. Even in his last game, I think he had about 20 points, 10 rebounds, around there. And I think that's only a glimpse into his full potential. And we all know that the Raptors are a pretty good organization for developing their players. So I think he has a lot of potential and will make a pretty good fantasy impact.
Yeah, it's a close one for me. They're around about the same in terms of their averages in points leagues, but I would go Barrett as well because I think he does have room to improve. He's gone on a new team. Perhaps he plays a bit more of a prominent role. Didn't quite see that yesterday. Ivica Zubac, he had a great week or a great couple of weeks, particularly while Kawhi Leonard was out. So that does change the dynamic. Kawhi's return now, so maybe his output does decrease moving forward. So yeah, I'll probably take RJ Barrett, but it's a nice position to be in a points league to have your pick of those two guys. And I guess the second part of that, he's got coverage everywhere, but Peyton Watson and Drummond are his two droppable guys. I'll definitely drop Peyton Watson first and then Drummond by the end of the week. Well, that takes us to the end. Any final thoughts?
Honestly, for me, it's just to keep an eye on the Raptors right now and the Knicks too. See how that trade plays out. I think it's going to be really well for Quickly and Barrett. So those are my two players to keep an eye on. How about you?
Yeah. Loving my Dante at the moment. So I want to see how he performs in the next game against the Bulls. I would like for him to push up towards 30 minutes and we can see if that's going to be rosterable for the rest of the season. But yeah, I've got high hopes of him, but let's wait and see.
For sure.
All right. Final words in terms of following us on Twitter, or X, I should say.
Yes. I keep forgetting that it's X now. But yeah, you can find me at Kayla_Fonte.
Yep. And you can find me at NBA Fantasy Bible. We have a few ideas coming, new shows. We'll be appearing on a few other shows as well, which is very exciting. But yeah, give us a like. Please subscribe to us and follow us on Twitter. But thank you very much, Kayla. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.